Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HeartWorking Dad podcast. I am your host, Gabriel Perez, and in this episode, I am going to be talking about becoming a king and that slow and steady process. If this is your first time listening, this podcast is for Christian fathers looking to put the heart work in themselves so that they can watch God transform their heart and the hearts of their wives and kids. And if this is the first time we're meeting, I am Gabriel Perez. Like I just said, I am a husband married to my wife for 12 years. We have 3 kids, 10, 7, and 3-year-old. My wife and I both work full-time jobs. We homeschool our kids. In addition to that, I am a certified biblical parenting coach from the National Center of Biblical Parenting Association. All right, just a little over a minute with all that. All right, the slow and steady process of becoming a king. This is obviously something I've taken from the book Becoming King by Morgan Snyder, but I just really have to share the breakthrough moment that I've had recently. As you've heard maybe you've heard in the last episode, doing 75, quitting. This week was really a kind of just those weeks where you just go through it all. And partly because our church was doing a fast. So I was doing a fast and seeking after the Lord, and the Lord just came through in so many ways that were amazing. But it was one of those things where you had to go through those painful moments to get to what He wanted to show you. And I think that with anything, when you're walking with God, when you're being fathered by God, there is grace in the process of pain. And we got to remember that. We got to remember that though the moment is dark, there's joy in the morning. And I'm paraphrasing that phrase, but that Bible verse, but it's so true. And when we go through these moments of being in the valley, it's really in the valley where the ministry happens. It's when you've gone through the valley that your heart is now open to receiving from God. And so one of the things I realized, and I heard this gentleman speak about how he had to let go the service of his false self. And I believe there's 2 sides to everything. There's the false self and the true self. The false self is someone who works through validation, who works on his own strength, who works for self-preservation. The true self is who God meant when He meant you. And it is a process to get into that true self. It's not a quick fix. It's not something that just happens. It is a process over time. And so this gentleman was speaking, and he realized that the person that was leading his life was a 13-year-old boy who was looking for validation and affirmation in his accolades. He wanted to be the Michael Jordan, so he achieved all these things on his own strength. Great things, but he found that it wasn't fulfilling. And that person was also just, constantly looking for validation, an angry kind of person, mad at the world. And when he got all that he worked for, nothing changed. Nothing changed for what he wanted. Nothing changed in his heart. He was actually more miserable. And so thinking about that and realizing in my own heart, who's running the show? I've really struggled with expectations. Expectations on myself, expectations on God, expectations on my family. And it can be really toxic. And it's because I'm in this self-preservation mode. I'm in this mode of trying to make things work. And I realized as a kid, that was something I did often. As a kid, I was able to get by on my own strength. I was able to do what needed to be done, and I got praise for that. oh, good job, you handled that. Good job, you did it on your own. It was up to me to get things done. And that person has been operating in my life for so long. That's why it's been so hard for me to just receive from the Lord, because it's letting go of me, letting go of myself, letting go of my own strength and trying to do things on my own. And what I've found is as now that I've gotten older and this person has operated so long inside of me, it was tiring. I was beginning to just break. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep going on in my own strength. And when everything started falling down, and here's the thing, things are not falling down. Things are fine. But in my mind, in my heart, they are falling down because I'm not doing enough to keep them up. I'm not doing enough to keep going. I need to do more. I need to strive. I need to make things work on my own strength. So outside, you can look and say, what's wrong? Everything looks good. But on the inside, nothing was going right. Nothing was going right in my heart. And so examining that child in my heart, he was tired. He was burnt out. He was frustrated. He was bitter. He was jealous. He was angry. He was insecure. Things I have to understand, like, this is how I'm operating. So when I looked at that, and I looked at that me, that person doing this day in and day out, God opened up to my heart how tired I was, how burnt out I had become on my own strength. And I even had imagery of it. And it was from the Jungle Book. King Louis's castle's fallen down. And the only thing he can do is he's holding up every pillar. He's holding up the next pillar, and then he's holding up the next one. And then eventually, when everything breaks, he's just holding up some rubble, and the castle's crushed. The castle's fallen down. That's where I would have been, I think, had I kept going down this path. But what God ministered to me in that moment was releasing that boy of service. Because I have to honor that. I have to honor that side of my false self, my self-preservation, because it's gotten me to where I am. It's gotten me to rise up in the ranks of a job. It's gotten me to really do a lot in my family and in my home. But in that process, he was tired. He was burnt out. He was frustrated. And I remember just having this moment with God. I'm walking on the treadmill. I'm listening, reading the Bible. I'm listening to some William Augusto and just praying. And it was, you need to relieve him of his service. And I'll tell you, this might sound weird. This might sound like, man, this is deep stuff. This is kind of out of the blue, or maybe you're thinking too much into it. But if you're tracking with becoming king, maybe you're not, maybe you are, you would see this is kind of that slow and steady process of becoming who God meant when he meant you. And so I had to just say, thank you, but your services are no longer needed. And releasing him. And when I did that, this wave just came upon me of relief. And, there was obviously just tears, just praise coming out. But it's going through all this because prior to that, I was breaking down. Prior to that, I was breaking down because I was putting on this mantle of 75 hard. I was failing in that, in my own strength. Nothing seems to be working in my strength. And now I just let it go and allow God to really work in me differently than how I'd allowed him to work before. And it's not going to be like the next day I'm fine. The next day I'm a different man. I'm a new man. No, I've released that, and it's continuing the journey, allowing God to change things. It's not like there was still a relief. I still feel a sense of relief, but it doesn't mean like, boom, all of a sudden, now I'm in my true nature. It's a process, slow and steady. But I think making these 2% increases over time leads to complete wholeheartedness. And I had a piece of that. And so now I'm continuing that journey. And so what I would say to you men who are listening, take a moment to think about who is operating inside of you. You know, a lot of times we operate out of our wounds. We operate out of the past, out of self-preservation. So maybe there's something in your past that says, this is how I need to operate. This is how I need to get things done apart from God. It's honestly, it's an exploration. I don't think it's an answer we find immediately. I don't think it's an answer we find and just know it's a process. But knowing and looking at yourself in a different light, like I heard that man talk about it. It didn't initially click to me. It took, some time of just walking around with it, sitting with it. It was it was a couple days, but it was a couple days of earnestly seeking the Lord. And so that's my story, sticking to it. And that's just my share with you men out there. Because working on my heart helps me to understand God, helps me to walk with God, and it helps me lead my family better because I'm leading from a healthy heart. So that's why the HeartWorking Dad is called that, because we put in the heart work in ourselves so that we can watch God transform our life and our family's life. So with that, I'll check you on the next episode. Talk soon.